November 12, 1943, 3 a.m. Inside an unmarked underground bunker beneath London. The challenge facing Allied planners was not merely logistical, it was metaphysical. They had to invade Fortress Europe, an undertaking so vast that surprise seemed impossible. German High Command, particularly Hitler, correctly anticipated an invasion in 1944. The sheer number of men, ships, and supplies required for Operation Overlord demanded a degree of concentration that would inevitably alert the enemy. The entire operation, the fate of Western Europe, rested on whether they could convince Hitler the invasion would land somewhere else. The chosen line needed to be audacious, prolonged, and anchored in the highest echelons of Nazi intelligence. The target was the narrowest part of the English Channel, Pas-de-Calais. The subsequent plan, Operation Fortitude, was deception on an industrial scale, designed to draw German panzer divisions hundreds of miles north and east of the true landing zones in Normandy. To sell this monumental deception, British intelligence created FUSAG, the first United States Army group. This was the Ghost Army, a fictitious force so massive, so formidable, that it appeared capable of mounting the most powerful invasion in history. Its headquarters were intentionally established in Dover and along the southeast coast, directly opposite Calais. The presence of FUSAG needed to be confirmed not just by visual confirmation, but by every single indicator that German intelligence was trained to look for. The theatrical props were unbelievable in their simplicity. In vast sheds, laborers were tirelessly manufacturing tanks made of rubber and canvas, aircraft crafted from plywood, and landing craft fabricated out of simple scaffolding and tarpaulins. These inflatable replicas, meticulously positioned and sometimes inflated only minutes before a predicted Luftwaffe reconnaissance flight, created the illusion of mile upon mile of concentrated military might. Fake ammunition dumps were built from stacked empty barrels, and troop concentrations were simulated by leaving tracks in the mud, then covering the area with a few genuine trucks driven in carefully choreographed patterns. This visual fabrication was merely the backdrop. The true weight of the deception lay in the sound and fury. FUSAG produced an enormous volume of electromagnetic traffic. Teams of operators maintained constant, high-priority radio chatter, meticulously mimicking the signal patterns of a genuine army group preparing for immediate assault. The real invasion forces maintained strict radio silence. The fake army was deliberately indiscreet, filling the airwaves with thousands of encrypted yet decipherable messages detailing logistical needs for the Calais crossing. But even rubber tanks and relentless radio noise could not seal the ultimate lie. That responsibility fell to the handful of double agents controlled by the highly secretive XX system, the Double Cross Committee. These men and women, including legary figures like Agent Garbo, were Nazi agents who had been turned by the British and were feeding meticulously curated high-grade falsehoods directly to the German High Command. They confirmed FUSAG's existence, attested to its overwhelming size, and, critically, verified that General George S. Patton, the commander Hitler feared most, was leading this juggernaut, confirming that the Pas-de-Calais was indeed the only logical target. Drew a calculated deal of visual spectacle, signal saturation, and insidious infiltration. British intelligence manufactured an enemy army that simply did not exist and successfully sold the fantasy to the most skeptical audience in the world. June 6, 1944, 12:15 a.m. Over the Cotentin Peninsula, the sky began to rain men. While deception continued to bloom along the eastern coast of Britain, the reality of Operation Overlord was violently unfolding in the west. C-47 transport planes, loaded with American and British airborne troops, cut through the night, dropping the first wave of soldiers tasked with securing the flanks of the coming seaborne invasion. The chaos erupting at Sainte-Marie-Église and the bridges over the Orne was not a feint, but the spearhead of the largest invasion force ever assembled. Yet hundreds of miles away, along the beaches of Pas-de-Calais, silence reigned. The crack units of the German 15th Army, nearly 200,000 strong and backed by some of Hitler's most formidable panzer divisions, remained stubbornly dug in. They were awaiting the real invasion. They listened for the roar of the massive fleet belonging to Fusag. They waited for the distinct presence of General Patton. When the news of the 5 massive landings at Normandy reached German High Command later that morning, the reaction was immediate and fatal to the Reich's defense strategy: dismissal. The reports pouring in from Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword were interpreted by Hitler himself and by nearly every senior officer as mere preliminary probing attacks. Why? Because the intelligence gathered over the preceding 6 months, all meticulously supplied by the double agents of the double-cross system, confirmed that the decisive blow would come further north, across the narrowest part of the English Channel. Normandy was considered inconvenient for logistics. Pas-de-Calais was the logical, the inevitable target. The success of Fortitude was not simply the successful landing at Normandy, but the continued failure of the German command to respond adequately. Critically, Hitler refused to release the 15th Army and the key panzer reserves, particularly the powerful ISS Panzer Corps, which was positioned perfectly to smash the nascent beachhead. Instead of rushing to repel the invasion in progress, they were held in an agonizing state of readiness, staring across the channel at a ghost army paralyzed by the fear that if they moved, the true, overwhelming Fusag invasion would land behind them and cut the Reich in two. For 4 critical weeks, the window necessary for the Allies to offload heavy equipment, build up supplies, and break out of the hedgerows, Hitler kept his best units in reserve, dedicated to defending against an enemy that existed only in carefully crafted radio chatter and meticulously faked topographical maps. The steel grip of the deception held firm. The German commanders, who had staked their reputations on the authenticity of the Fusag threat, simply could not accept that the most feared general in the Allied command, George S. Patton, was commanding thin air. The legacy of Operation Fortitude is the understanding that intelligence and misdirection can be a more potent military force than armor or manpower. The Ghost Army did not fire a shot, yet it neutralized divisions and secured the critical advantage that allowed the Allies to survive the initial landings. The meticulous weaving of lies, executed by a small group of handlers, agents, and engineers, fundamentally altered the deployment of forces on the continent. The Allies paid a terrible price on the beaches of Normandy, but that price would have been exponentially higher had they immediately faced the full, unhindered fury of the panzer divisions held captive by Patton's phantom force. The ultimate victory belonged to the shadows, proving that the greatest battles are sometimes won not on the fields of fire, but in the minds of the enemy. July 25, 1944, deep inside the Führer bunker in Rastenburg, the situation reports arriving in Hitler's headquarters were, to the Allies, the ultimate confirmation of success. Even weeks after the D-Day landings, key German divisions, specifically the powerful 15th Army, remained anchored to the Pas-de-Calais, waiting for the real invasion that Fortitude promised was still coming. The German High Command, paralyzed by fear and confirmation bias, had consumed the lie whole. This strategic immobility was the dividend paid by Operation Fortitude. The enduring legacy of the War of Shadows is not merely the successful misdirection of tanks, but the profound shift it heralded in strategic warfare. Fortitude demonstrated unequivocally that the careful curation of enemy perception was often a more potent weapon than massed firepower. It was the purest application of Clausewitz's dictum: war is the continuation of policy by other means. And in 1944, those means included rubber tanks and fabricated friships with turncoat agents. Intelligence became the ultimate force multiplier. By dedicating vast resources not to building more landing craft, but to building a believable fictional army, the Allies leveraged psychology and theater to neutralize tens of thousands of enemy troops without firing a shot. It turned the complex, unpredictable machinery of war into a stage play directed solely for the enemy's viewing pleasure. The costs of D-Day were horrific, yet they were minimized by the efforts of artists and engineers who manufactured reality. Had the 15th Army been free to counterattack, the Normandy beachhead would almost certainly have been crushed within days. Fortitude was not merely a distraction. It was the essential, invisible scaffold upon which the invasion was built. This success established the permanent blueprint for modern strategic deception, proving that misinformation, when coupled with airtight security and operational discipline, is the key to achieving asymmetric advantages. The principles honed by the double-cross system, using real agents to feed believable lies into genuine military communication channels, became foundational doctrine. Fortitude showed future generations of military planners that winning the battle space required first winning the information space. The war was expanding beyond the trench and the cockpit. It was now fought in the radio waves, the mimeographed memos, and the mind of the opposition commander. Yet, we must remember the profound cost that Fortitude spared. It did not just save the operation, it saved lives. Every division held captive by the fiction represented young men who did not have to face combat immediately upon landing. The thousands of casualties the Allies did sustain would have become tens of thousands had they faced the full, unhindered might of the German defenses. The true heroes of this operation are perhaps the least recognized. The mathematicians calculating plausible radio traffic, the wireless operators transmitting convincing gibberish, and the agents like Garbo, living perpetually on the knife edge of discovery. The genius of Fortitude lies in its sheer audacity and its profound trust in the power of the human imagination, both to construct reality and to accept illusion. It stands as a timeless monument to the fact that wars are not won solely by those who possess the most destructive capability, but by those who possess the greatest cunning. The victory of D-Day, and ultimately the liberation of Europe, was ensured by an army of ghosts, proving that sometimes the most effective armies are those that never truly exist. The greatest battles are forever won in the shadows, where perception is reality, and the finest armor is a thoroughly convincing lie.